All right, welcome everyone to our sort of student young member webinar from principles to practice, how safety actually gets delivered. This is a webinar that we organized about a month and a half ago to try to reach out to some of the to the students and some of the younger professionals and really emphasize and kind of talk about how transportation safety, gets delivered. How does it get delivered from a federal perspective, from a state perspective, local perspective, and then also private sector perspective, and how all these different people, the professionals in these different spaces, kind of work together to do our best to kind of deliver a safer transportation system. My name is Matt Hardy. I am filling in for Gordon Meth, who's the ITE president, but he had other professional responsibilities and could not join us today. I'm the Deputy Executive Director and Chief Technical Officer here at ITE. So what I wanted to start off with was, and we're trying to do this with lots of the presentations that ITE International gives, is just really focus and try to center us on transportation safety. There's a lot of information and data out there, and every single one of those data points has a human story associated with it. I think all of us could probably raise our hand and know somebody who was either killed, seriously injured, involved in a crash in some way. For mine, it was my Uncle Tommy in 1994. He was driving on I-95 in North Carolina and was killed in a fairly violent crash that involved an 18-wheeler and an SUV. So he died tragically, left a wife and two kids, my cousins, my aunt. And we think about him almost every day, right? I think about him every day and kind of what could be if he were still here. So just want to kind of ground us in that. And that kind of leads to ITE's Safety Roadmap and Action Plan, our vision. If you haven't seen this, there's a QR code down there that takes you to it, and you can learn more about it. That through collaborative and collective action to achieve zero road fatalities, because we believe that we can achieve zero road fatalities. What is ITE going to do? What are we going to do? Number one, leverage our volunteer members and our staff capabilities. So all the members out there like you that are joining us for the webinar today, the members that are on the webinar, kind of the panelists, that hopefully lead the development and dissemination of resources, services, and tools that will ultimately foster this cultural shift to better plan, design, and operate the transportation system. And what better way to sort of start that fostering that cultural shift than to get engaged with those younger professionals, those students that are just coming into the profession, and really ingrain this idea of transportation safety within their sort of mindset. So that's the purpose of this webinar is really connect with you and show you how you can get involved with ITE and hopefully affect this and foster this cultural shift. One thing that we are emphasizing is, and we'll talk about this at the end as well, is to become an ITE safety partner. What can you do within your area of responsibility to really help affect change, foster that cultural shift. There's the QR code. You can kind of sign up for this. There are 10 actions that we've identified that you can select, like what are 3 of them. There's also the option of identifying 3 new ones. Ones that aren't on there that you think that you can do that are within your control. So we encourage you, it doesn't matter if you're a student or a professional, to go out there and take that ITE Safety Partner Pledge. With that, I want to go around and do quick introductions of all the wonderful people, very smart people who are going to be our panelists today. So on the right side, you can kind of see what the agenda is. We're going to start with Ron Knevicic from Georgia DOT. I probably said that wrong. I apologize. From Georgia DOT, one of our younger members, very active and involved with ITE. And then we'll go into the I'm not sure how to say this nicely, the older people or the more seasoned professionals or whatever. Hopefully everybody laughs at that. But we have different perspectives. Rob Ritter from FHWA, Rachel and John from state DOTs, John Davis from local agencies, and then Megan Mittman from the private sector. After that, we'll have a quick Q&A. So we encourage questions from all of you. Please, ask them. It's an opportunity for you to ask them. We're hopefully going to break down some barriers and everything. With that, you could use the chat functionality within Zoom to do that. That's the best way to ask your questions. And then after that, Lindsay Van Paris from our council leadership team will talk about how you can get involved with some of the safety work that we're doing at ITE. Doesn't matter if you're a student, young professional, older professional, we welcome your involvement. So with that, Ron, do you want to say a quick word about yourself?
Hey guys, Ron Konasevich with Georgia DOT. I'm the state safety engineering manager there. And my fun fact is I did a marathon this last weekend. It was up a mountain and back. It was called Hell and Back in Helen, Georgia. So it was quite a fun one, very painful. I'm limping a little bit today, but yeah, it was a good weekend.
Great. 26.2 miles and he's at work. Awesome.
Yeah, it was actually 27. They lied a little bit.
Oh. Rob?
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be here. I'll kick it off for the seasoned professionals. I wasn't going to mention the fun fact that of marathons because that was a long time ago and I'm way too old to do those anymore. But even further back, fun fact, I got an undergraduate degree in religion along with my undergrad degree in civil engineering. And so would get questions all the time, whether or not I was going to build churches as a career. But really, I was moving into safety. I always said that I was going to build bridges and pray they don't fall down. So it's worked out pretty well for me so far.
All right. Thanks, Rob. Rachel Carpenter.
Good afternoon from sunny Sacramento, California. My name's Rachel Carpenter, and I work in the safety program at Caltrans. Let's see, fun fact. Well, I definitely need to separate myself from these seasoned folks. I was born in the 80s, so I think I'm much more aligned with Ron. I love playing the piano and recently got my piano tuned. And so it sounds fantastic, but I get to practice. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Rachel. John Milton.
So my name's John Milton. I'm the Director of Transportation Safety at Washington State DOT. And I guess my fun fact is that I have 3 scooters. Can't really walk very well, but I have 3 scooters. 2 of them are super scooters. They go 45 and 50 miles an hour, but I will never go that fast on those 2 things. So that's my fun fact for the day.
Great. Thanks, John. John Davis.
Good afternoon. My name's John Davis. I am the city traffic engineer for Des Moines, Iowa. And my fun fact is that I am on a quest to visit all the Major League Baseball stadiums. I'm over halfway there and just maybe have a couple handfuls left to fulfill that quest.
Great. Thanks, John. Megan Mittman.
Everybody, I'm Megan Mittman. I'm a principal with Fehr & Peers out in the San Francisco Bay Area. I've been really involved in IT over the years. I helped start our Complete Streets Council. I chaired the Safety Council, and now I'm on the council leadership team. And a fun fact, I have twin 14-year-old girls who are getting ready to graduate from 8th grade in a couple of weeks, and I get very inspired by them every day, but also think about their safety and their independence and ability to move around our city as a lot of the motivation and meaning that I bring to the work.
Great. Finally, Lindsay Van Paris.
Hello, I'm Lindsay Van Paris with GHD. I am also with Rachel in sunny Sacramento, California, and was also born in the 80s. My fun fact, the little known fact about me is that even though I am born and raised in California, I grew up in a small farm town, and rodeo was my high school sport.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. Those are going to be your speakers for today, along with a little fun fact about them. Again, hoping to break down those barriers, ask some questions, put it in the chat, that kind of thing. So with that, we're gonna get right into it with Ron. So Ron.
Hey guys, so I'm talking to y'all today about some things I think are most important to get into leadership in a transportation safety career. So you can go to the next slide. I have 3 takeaways for y'all today. First is not to shy away from innovation. There's so many new practices, new data and technology out there, and it can be brought into typical practices and ways we do analysis. And I'll show a couple examples of those today. The second is to stay data-driven. I find it really easy in this field to kind of just do what a politician's asking, what mayor's asking, or city council person's asking. But I believe truly it's our responsibility as practitioners make sure all of the decisions we're making, whether it's in project identification or countermeasure selection, are as data-driven as possible. And the third is to always think about implementation and the design of these projects. Don't be high level. I see a lot of engineers and practitioners make really high level recommendations and not focus on what's going to get built on the ground. I think that's the most important part. So next slide. A little bit about myself. I went to Georgia Tech. I have a bachelor's and master's degree there in civil engineering. I have 4 years of experience at GDOT, starting out as the state pedestrian and bicycle engineer, then the supervisor of the safety program. Now I manage that safety program. I'm also heavily involved in IT. I'm the vice chair of the Data-Driven Safety Analysis Committee. I do have a call for y'all to help get involved in this committee and help write some of our resources later on. I'm also involved in the local chapter in Georgia as the student chapter liaison. So always feel free to reach out if you are a student in Georgia and looking to get involved. Next slide. So when I started in transportation safety, it was really with my master's thesis. That's what got me involved. It was very technical, building crash prediction models for runoff road crashes, doing validation, using this variable ball bank indicator, which is a measure of the lateral forces on a vehicle. It's available on lots of roadways, but wasn't really used in predicting crashes yet. So that was the emphasis of the thesis. But what I found kind of talking to various practitioners is they love tables. So the one piece that I put in there was this table you'll see on the right, categorizing into curves into risk levels based on the roadway geometry, that ball bank indicator value, to break them into different risk levels based on their those various roadway environments. The next slide. One of the first projects I had at GDOT was implementing that master's thesis. So taking that complex data analysis and putting into something practical. We used both observed crash data as well as predicted crash data from that table I showed you before. And those higher risk curves got more treatments, things like high friction surface treatment, curve ahead markings on the ground, typical MUTCD signage, and on our highest risk curves, flashing signage. We've had over 20,000 signs implemented thus far and several thousand curves. So that's just, in my opinion, a great way that we took this complex research, put it into something really practical and implementable. Then we rinse and repeat the same analysis for mid-block crossings in Georgia. These are at bus stops. The bottom line here being when there's a bus stop, people typically need to cross the roadway. Just because your origin destination is on one side doesn't mean your bus stop is on that same side. So we built the crash prediction models, just different variables here. And they're looking at those 3 different treatments of either raised crosswalks, rapid flashing beacons, or pedestrian hybrid beacons. And they have over 20 projects programmed and hopefully 150 to come, and a very similar methodology as before. Next slide. And then we kind of dealt with, well, how do we deal with this new data coming in? And one of those key data points is near miss analysis or critical conflicts. There's not really a standardized way to leverage this data yet. And that's one of the things we're working on in the IT Data-Driven Safety Analysis Committee. But one thing we did know is that as those near misses get closer to becoming a collision, or that time to collision gets smaller, the risk of a crash becomes higher. And as the speed of those near misses gets higher, the severity of that crash probability is higher as well. So what we've done in Georgia is we've taken that video. Typically, when we would go collect counts, we would collect video, and we've added near miss on to that in many of our road safety audits. Next slide. Then we took this data and put it into kind of that standard practice. Benefit cost analysis is a key way safety analysis is done. So we built a crash prediction model, leveraged ITE method to do this. We're predicting crash costs based on that speed and post-encroachment time of those near misses, weighed those near misses together with our observed crash data. And what you're seeing in this image here is 5 different potential crossing locations on a road safety audit that we did, where we leveraged that expected benefit cost ratio that weighs those predicted and observed together to actually help us justify projects and see maybe where we shouldn't be looking, where some of those crashes were too random and rare, but there wasn't a high concentration of crossings or near misses at those. So next slide. Another thing I want to emphasize today is collaboration with other groups, whether it's other groups in other departments in an agency, other organizations, other local governments, etc. One example I always like to highlight is our partnerships with the resurfacing group at GDOT. It really just took asking and trying to coordinate how can we involve safety into these upcoming resurfacings. We started small, doing things like gore striping that you'll see on the left and some slight marking adjustments on interstate projects or some of our bigger resurfacings. But we've escalated that to doing full roadway reconfigurations to get bicycle accommodations and pairing that with some of our signal maintenance projects. So the key part here was just asking and seeing, well, what can we include? What can we do to save the agency money so we don't have to resurface the road after they just resurfaced it, and not just put back what was there, but try to enhance safety. And I also want to highlight, keep design as a tool. If you're interested in data analysis and like myself, still take the time to learn design. I think it's a really practical and useful skill, helps you understand how things can get implemented more. What you're seeing here is one of the first designs I did, just really trying to optimize the better use of a roadway environment. Always ask if you can get involved in some design for various projects. It makes your data analysis, I would say, better and more easy to implement. Next slide. There's a slide later on getting involved in ITE, but we have lots of publications that we need help on in the Data-Driven Safety Analysis Committee. You don't have to be an expert. We need people that will put pen to paper and get things written. So we have panels of experts you can talk to and we can have discussions on. We just need some people, some students, some young professionals that are willing to help write. Next slide. So back to those 3 key takeaways I brought up at the beginning. Don't shy away from innovation. Just like those various practices I talked about today, it can be brought into typical practice. We weren't doing prediction models at GDOT before. In just a few years, we started implementing them. We started leveraging that near miss data. And stay data-driven. All the data I talked about, we tried to be proactive, but we remain data-driven throughout all of this. And then think about implementation. Don't be too high level. All of this had very clear design implications. So thanks very much, guys. And that's my 10-minute spiel.
Great. Thanks, Ron. I think before we go to the other panelists, I think Ron had, that was a great, in my opinion, you took your master thesis, right, research and everything, and then actually applied that at GDOT. What a cool thing to be able to do. Are there any questions from some of the people, from some of the participants out there for Ron, specific to kind of some of the work that he's working on, or how he got to where he got right now from college into Georgia DOT? We'll just take a quick minute for this. And you can unmute yourself, turn your camera on. You can use the chat. All right, I don't see any coming in. So we'll keep on going. So thanks, Ron, for that. Please don't go away. You'll be part of the bigger panel as well. So at this point, we want to kind of switch over to other perspectives for career perspectives and how different types of agencies, different levels are kind of looking at safety, implementing safety within their what they have control over. So again, we're looking at it from the federal perspective, the state DOT perspective, local agency perspective, and then private sector as well. So we're going to start off with Rob Ritter with the FHWA Office of Safety. So Rob, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that people can see you and not just the screen.
Sounds great. Thanks, Matt. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm Rob Ritter. I'm the Associate Administrator for Safety at the Federal Highway Administration, and we're going to kind of start this conversation that ITE's put together, if you will, at the top. I represent the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Federal Highway Administration, and what we do is to provide stewardship and oversight over construction, maintenance, and preservation of the nation's highways, bridges, and tunnels. The federal aid program, the highway program across this country, where federal highway provides assistance to states and tribal governments and local governments, is a federally assisted state administered program. So in most cases, state departments of transportation that you're going to hear from later in this presentation, local departments of transportation that you'll hear from, they make the decisions as to exactly which projects and what kinds of activities they're going to implement on the roadway. At Federal Highway, we're providing guidance, we're providing regulations to ensure that all of the funding and activities meet the requirements that are established by Congress and in our regulations. And we're providing a lot of oversight and information about what we think should be done, and really trying to convince all of our partners all across the country to implement safety. So I'll talk a little bit about how we do that, what some of our emphasis areas are, and then you'll hear more throughout today from those that we work with, and as they make their decisions, some of which you heard from Ron already today. Let me start by saying safety is the #1 priority here at the Department of Transportation and at the Federal Highway Administration. I've been here in DOT for over 25 years. Every Secretary of Transportation, every administrator of the Federal Highway Administration will come in and tell you that safety is the #1 priority. Matt talked about the fact that we're here to save lives. 36,640 people are estimated to have died on U.S. roadways in 2025. That's 100 people a day. And so the folks that we have here and the fact that you're with us today are the dedicated people who are trying to change that number and get to 0 people dying on our roadways. That's where we need to be. We've got a long way to go. And to get there, we need to prioritize safety. We need to talk about safety culture, and we need to work towards what we call a safe system approach. So at the Federal Highway Administration and all the partners you're going to hear from today are all moving towards a paradigm that really is being emphasized across the world on focusing on the fact that 0 fatalities is the only acceptable number. People should not be dying on our roadways. And it's a different way of thinking about how we go about this, recognizing that the people who use the roads, whether drivers, bicyclists, pedestrians, anybody on our transportation system, people are going to make mistakes. They're going to make poor decisions. But we, as those who are working in the transportation industry, have to create a system where those mistakes or poor decisions or what happens on the roadways doesn't result in fatal crashes. So we have to recognize that humans are vulnerable, and we have an opportunity, a responsibility to design a system that works for the people who are using it and allows them to get where they need to be in a safe manner. There are a couple different ways that we do this and some of the things that we emphasize. And one of the biggest ones I want to talk about from kind of a high level is what we call a safety culture. So we are working with our partners and working with organizations to try to implement a strong safety culture where this conversation about how do you ensure safety is implemented in practice is the primary or one of the primary conversations that you're having, that you are emphasizing commitment to safety over the other competing demands that you have, delivering projects on time, delivering projects on budget, reducing congestion, protecting the environment, all of the things that we're trying to do, doing all of those things while we're improving the safety experience of the transportation system. And that's not how engineering always was. In a lot of cases, we as engineers in the transportation profession were designing to standards, building to standards, but not necessarily recognizing that there were opportunities to change the design in ways that met the local context and the local user that would provide a better safety experience. And looking at that safe system approach, recognizing that we all across a wide range of disciplines share a responsibility for safety, all of those are elements that we try to emphasize in our oversight at the Federal Highway Administration, in the tools and the resources that we provide to all of our partners across the country. We also want to make sure that we're being proactive in safety. And some of the things the examples that Ron talked about and examples you'll hear from others throughout the presentation today, where we're looking at locations and doing data analysis to understand where there are the risky locations on our roadways, not waiting for the crashes to occur, but recognizing that there are types of design, types of situations along the roadway system where more crashes are likely to occur, and treating those locations before the crashes so that those crashes never occur, and we get towards our goal. One of the biggest things that Federal Highway does, you'll hear this from our partners, is we provide funding to states and ultimately in many cases to locals and to tribal governments, the funding that Congress provides through the Federal Highway Administration back out to the states. There are a number of different federal highway funding programs that are focused on safety, and we'll have an opportunity hopefully to talk more, and I can take some questions. But the Highway Safety Improvement Program, 6% of our overall budget, is provided out to the states specifically for improving safety on the nation's roadways. And just to kind of repeat the emphasis of safety, Congress has determined that our federal Highway Safety Improvement Program funds can be used on all roads across the country. Most of our other federal programs are applicable only to a certain subset of those higher classification roadways, but for safety, that can be used on all roadways. All our other funding programs, whether it's the bridge program or the general funding programs, all have safety as a element of the decisions and how those programs are used, and we can talk more about incorporating safety in those program decisions. We have programs on work zone safety, traffic incident management, safety funds specifically for tribal transportation. We do research in safety and operations and share that research and those learnings with states and local departments of transportation in terms of what are some of the more effective safety countermeasures that can be applied, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Let me pause for just a second and step back again and talk about that what we are doing at the Federal Highway Administration is really implementing the legislation that's passed by Congress. And primarily for the entire federal aid program, states are required that any federal aid project is conducive to safety. And so we want to ensure that projects that are implemented using federal aid funds support our overall safety goals. And then in addition to those, that legislation that Congress passes, Federal Highway will then put out regulations. And that's another big element of what we do, is to provide more information and requirements on how states and locals and tribes who are using our funds, the standards and designs that they use. And so there's an entire section of the regulation where we have design standards that require the highest practical and feasible level of safety for people and property with the nation's highway transportation system. I don't have a lot of time. I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but whether we're talking about in the planning and programming part of the process of developing a project, we have guidance, resources, technical assistance that we provide on transportation safety planning, strategic highway safety plans, local and regional plans. We've put out a great deal of information on the safe system approach and safe system design, on data-driven safety analysis. You heard some from Ron, what's happening in Georgia. We provide a lot of additional information to other states to try to support a robust data-driven safety analysis program, programs on road safety audits, on how to implement or add additional safety countermeasures in rehabilitation projects, in design projects, construction, and maintenance projects. No, I don't want to go on for too long, but I do want to take just another minute and talk about proven safety countermeasures. So one of the other elements, activities that we produce out of my office is a list of proven safety countermeasures. This is kind of a subset of the variety of options and opportunities that are available to roadway owners and operators, to state and local DOTs, when you've got a recognized safety problem or safety issue, we've got a shortened list of countermeasures that we know work, that we've got the evidence-based return on investment, the crash modification factor that'll tell you if you've got a certain number of crashes and you implement this kind of improvement, you're likely to see this level of reduction in those crashes. We put that out as an easy resource for very busy professionals who are trying to make quick decisions in terms of where they can look and find countermeasures and improve safety as they're implementing their projects. So there's a lot of different places, all available on our website, where you can find all of these resources. We're pushing out innovations, including the Everyday Counts program. Just a plug for today. We announced the latest round of EDC 8, Everyday Counts 8, which includes a variety of innovative techniques and strategies for transportation agencies to use in a number of different areas. EDC 8 includes nighttime work zone safety countermeasures to improve the experience on work zones on nighttime and reduce nighttime crashes. So there's a lot going on. You're going to hear a lot of examples from the states, and I'm looking forward to taking questions and continuing this conversation. Matt, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this.
Hey, thank you very much, Rob. Matt had to step away briefly, but thank you very much for doing that. I'd like to invite Rachel Carpenter with Caltrans.
Thanks so much, Colleen, and good afternoon to all of you. So when we talk about safety, especially in spaces like ITE, we usually start with the principles, and Rob did a great job covering those. We talk about safety as our top priority. We talk about the safe system approach. We talk about the death toll on our roads. We talk about reducing fatalities and serious injuries. But what I want to focus on today is a little bit different about how safety actually gets delivered, and more importantly, what it means for you, especially early on in your careers. But before that, I want to just give you a little bit of an overview of my journey to my current position. So I studied civil engineering at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo for my undergraduate degree, and then went on to UC Davis for my master's in civil. And I started my career, was fortunate to get a job with the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency, where I was responsible for pedestrian and bicyclist safety projects. And after leaving the Bay Area, I stood up a pedestrian and bicyclist safety program at Caltrans. But I think what really defined sort of my journey is a shift to the role most recently that I've been in, which is the first ever chief safety officer of Caltrans, and lead of the Division of Safety Programs. So that's just a little bit of an overview of sort of my career journey. And I think through all of that, one of the biggest things that I've learned is that there's this real gap between knowing what works and actually implementing it. So I decided, when asked to join this webinar today, instead of giving you sort of an overview of the work that we do, the specifics of how we deliver projects at Caltrans, I thought I'd give you sort of a bit of a different take. So earlier in my career, I thought that if we had better data or better design guidance, we'd naturally get better outcomes. But that's not how it works. Delivering safety really means navigating competing priorities and funding constraints and organizational dynamics. So the work and the real impact happens in that space between analysis and implementation. So your role, I encourage you to think about your role as not just being to identify the right answer. It's really to make that answer actionable. And a lot of the times, and especially for me in my role now, it means working with teams to translate the technical ideas into something that decision makers can understand and support and implement. Because being technically right isn't enough almost ever. And your real value comes from moving something from an idea to a decision and then to action. One of the other shifts I think that I wanted to cover is this idea of thinking beyond individual projects, and that safety isn't delivered one project at a time. It's really delivered through systems. And it shows up in how projects are scoped and how speeds are set and how trade-offs are made and how success is measured. And Megan will go over a little bit more of that in her slides. But it's about how the entire organization thinks about safety. At Caltrans, we're a department of 22,000. And we don't get closer to our goal one project at a time. It really takes, the collection of all of our actions. So as you think about your career, don't just focus on the projects that you're going to work on. Think about how you can influence that system behind those projects. And another thing that I've learned is that when safety actually gets delivered, it's because multiple things have aligned. So you have a policy that supports it, and programs that reinforce it, and teams that are coordinated, and decisions that are consistent. So it's not just about design, although that is a very important component. It's about how everything comes together. And that alignment is what turns principles into outcomes. And if you are a student, a lot of what you're learning now likely is technical. Or if you are recently out of school, you probably recall that a lot of your classes are technical, and that is, absolutely important. But the skills that really drive impact are often different. And like I said, it's about translating those technical concepts into something that's digestible for decision makers. And importantly, building that alignment across teams, and then communicating risks and trade-offs, and then connecting that full chain together from evidence to policy to implementation and outcomes. And that ability to connect is really what makes us effective, I think, in this field. The last thing I want to leave you with is, and one thing that I really wish that I had understood earlier, is that you don't have to be in a leadership role to make a difference. And that impact doesn't come from your title, it comes from how you show up. So you can ask better questions and bring forward data that reframes the decision and challenge assumptions, especially around speed and risk when we're talking about safety. And those small actions really do add up. Like Director Ritter said, if there's one thing you can take away, it's start asking, how does this decision affect safety outcomes? And then keep asking it, because that question alone can shift an entire conversation and decisions into, in a really meaningful way. And so at the end of the day, like, a career in transportation safety isn't just about analyzing problems. It's about building things that didn't exist before. And a lot of times that's programs or policies or partnerships, or at Caltrans, I know for me, it's about building capacity within an organization to consistently deliver safety over time. And that's how you move from principles into practice. So those are the things I wanted to share. Thank you so much, Matt, for the invitation. And with that, I'll hand it back over.
Thank you very much, Rachel. That was great. You did get a Go Mustangs in the chat too, so you can always take that.
Ciao, Polly.
Next we have John Milton.
Let me first say I'm quite inspired by you, Rachel. No doubt about that. Let me give you a little bit of history about where I came into safety. And it's kind of funny because when I first went into practice, I was a geotechnical engineer and I was doing foundation work. So I was in the water sometimes where things were flooding out, and it just didn't suit me. I wanted to do something, at least from my perspective, that would have a difference, in safety, and traffic engineering was sort of my next step. And my career kind of surrounded that, and crashes were one of the particular aspects that I got dealt with. I did a master's degree and a PhD at the University of Washington, and I was looking at crash severity. So my dissertation was generalized extreme value models, empirical applications to state highway accident severities. That's a big thing, a lot of words. But the bottom line is what I was trying to do is understand what was happening out in the field, what was happening, why were crashes happening, and is there anything that I could do about it? And I think one of the takeaways that I'm hearing from all my colleagues is that it's what you do with your work, how you are willing to innovate, how you're willing to learn, and then how are you willing to apply that to whatever activities. Throughout my career, I've been in planning, design, operations, and I went through the whole series of different activities that a department often will have. So for me, that was very, very good learning. I think one of the key aspects that I took away from all that is your ability to communicate is key to the success that you will have. Your willingness to make that communication is very, very important. And you're willing to take chances. Safety is one of those fields for me in particular, and I see this with a lot of the safety engineers, both nationally and internationally, is that you're out there trying to make a difference, often with limited ability to do so with the resources you have. So innovation is one of the key things that becomes very, very important to your success. One thing that I have found very, very enlightening within my agency is working with the other people. I work with Rachel basically not on a daily basis, but pretty near that. And it's a willingness to share your insights and to grow from those insights into different places. My advice to you is to take those steps to learn, to take those steps to continuously learn, and to reach out with others and share what you know as well, so that you both can learn from those aspects. A lot of what drove me in safety was I actually was very near involved in a multi-vehicle crash where I was the first person on the scene and dealing with somebody who was not in very good shape. It was a young 10-year-old person who went out of the back of the vehicle and landed on the pavements. But what I took from that is that I could do better. I was in my career at a point where I was making a lot of decisions, but that I could do better by understanding what my impacts were within the agency and to try to make change in terms of the safety culture overall. Rob talked about the safe system, which is really key to us being successful. The other thing is understanding that there are more than just vehicles out on the system, and that we have the ability to make those changes, and really taking that out to the public to help them as well as them to help you in understanding what the real needs are. Everything, as Rachel says, needs to be actionable. When you're in safety, you're driving a lot of things through different parts of the agency, and people need to understand how they can make a difference. When you think about safety, one thing that we often talk about is the numbers of safety, and that's important, but it's people that make up those numbers, which is the greater importance for us, is trying to change fatal and serious crashes to maybe just crashes or avoided crashes. And when we can do that, we're making a very, very significant difference overall. If I could change one thing throughout my career, and for some of you who are beginning those careers, is stay open-minded. Listen to those who have something to offer, and sometimes listen to those with people who don't, but try to glean what you can from them and go through a series of never-ending learning, so that you can get at a higher level, and always make those steps. Those small little steps will have an incredible impact in your career, and it will have an incredible impact on those people you're trying to help with the work that you're going to be doing. You're going to be going in different directions, and stay flexible to whatever those are and open to the change that is created by them. if I also give you recommendations, is to take those steps, to have those discussions sometimes that are difficult. You're going to be challenged throughout your career to do that. But if you, particularly in the fields where you can make change by just talking up, do so. So with that, I'll hand it back.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And next we have John Davis.
All right. Thank you, Colleen. It's a pleasure to be here. Just to reintroduce myself, I'm John Davis. I'm the city traffic engineer for Des Moines, Iowa. And I want to give you a little bit of a background on my journey as well. The vast majority of my career, I've worked for public agencies. This is my third public agency that I've worked with. And I've also worked in the private sector for about 12 years. I want to thank Rachel and Lindsay for reminding me when I started my career, which was slightly before they were both born, it sounds like. But in any case, what's interesting and what I'm going to try to convey is some of the process we do from a local agency standpoint. And I've had the privilege of, as I said, working now for 3 public agencies in 3 different states. I started my career in Indiana, working for the city of Indianapolis. Then I moved down to Florida and I worked for a county, Lee County, which is in the southwest portion of the state. And now, after some time in the private sector, I'm working for Des Moines, Iowa. But in every case, every stop along the way, safety was one of the forefronts. That we wanted to safely move people and goods in our communities. Now, things have changed over that time period of how we approach it, how we deal with it, and the countermeasures and the techniques we use. But first and foremost, safety was always part of that. In our daily decisions, we always keep safety there. My staff, when we talk about project planning here in Des Moines, we're always thinking safety in all of our day-to-day work. We're looking at visibility issues, reaction time, conflict points. How do we manage parking in and around intersections? But we're also using data, and that's really important to do. And I would echo what has already been said with regards to using data to help identify the risk. And because in certain degrees, depending on how sophisticated you're able to get, if you're able to get near miss data, which we're trying to move towards, that helps to get the information that can make decisions before the catastrophic tragedy of a crash actually occurs. The other aspect that we try to do is when we're tearing up a street for, say, a stormwater project, we actually ask the question, does the street's current configuration still make sense? Things change over time. Your local community will change. The demographics will change. We're seeing a renaissance and a rebuild and a resurgent in our downtown area with residential units coming in. So some of our corridors that used to be more commuter routes aren't so much. The traffic's kind of leveled out, or maybe they've decreased because things have changed over whatever 25, 30 years since something was built. So we look at, say, a corridor that now carries 7,000 vehicles a day, which roughly translates to 700 vehicles in a peak hour. Well, does it really need to be a 4-lane undivided roadway? Well, no, because that can carry much more in a peak hour than just 700 vehicles in both total for both directions. So we transition that to a 3-lane section with maybe a center turn lane. We can provide some bicycle lanes that helps from a transportation health, or we have an area for a cycle track. So it's a way that we can proactively right size the system. We're also now, this is what, quite honestly, when I started my early part of my career, we didn't design for all users. We designed primarily for vehicles, and sometimes pedestrians were included in that. Bicyclists were maybe an afterthought, quite honestly. But now we're looking at the whole picture and designing for for the vulnerable users and all the users that are out there. There's also one thing to keep in mind. You can make incremental changes that can add up, and you don't have to do a big, huge thing to improve safety. We had a case where we have a street in Des Moines. We were seeing there were parked cars because there was a lot of duplexes on one side of the street, and they were seeing side swipe crashes. That the road didn't have a center line. It was wide enough to have a parking lane and then 2 travel lanes, but people were kind of hogging the middle, and it was leading to crashes. It wasn't a heavily traveled road, so it didn't lend itself to having a center line by standard, which is roughly 6,000 vehicles a day at least, or you can go down a little bit less. But we elected to extend the center line through this area, which is about maybe a 2 or 3 block area. Since we've done that, we've gone down from roughly 13 crashes a year to 2 over a 5-year period. So that was a little simple thing that can help, and it makes an incremental changes, such as signal timing changes during a construction project, adjusting the timing. That can help move people a little bit more efficiently and lessens the opportunities for crashes. But the last thing I want to really point out is you need to build trust. So you need to learn how to communicate with people, get beyond the numbers, take maybe a Toastmasters class, if you will, so you can bone up on your public speaking or your interpersonal skills. But building trust through your communication and your consistency is what will win the day. Because no matter how much data you have, somebody that you're talking to generally has a valid driver's license. So they will think they know more than you do about traffic engineering or traffic safety, or how and what the countermeasure should be. So build that trust, be open, be transparent, explain the why. Why are we doing this? We just had a public workshop, it's an open house earlier this week, where we're proposing the first mini roundabouts in Des Moines. It's challenging in an urban area to shoehorn in a roundabout without taking a lot of land sometimes. So we're going with mini roundabouts at a couple locations that respectively rank 4th and 76th of all the other intersections statewide that are similar to them in terms of potential crash reduction. So, but we've got a really good reception from the neighborhood. We just got to find the funds. And that's where we look to our partners at the state and federal level to help supplement our funding and our efforts at the local effort. So with that, I will pass it back on to our next speaker.
Well, thank you very much, John. All right, Megan Mittman, to close out this portion.
I have slides, if it's okay to share those. Thanks so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with everybody today, and hopefully to get some inspiration as you all are finishing up school or starting off in your career to choose to focus on safety, because it's such a way to bring, I think, a lot of meaning and impact to the work that we do. My fun fact earlier was that I have twin 14-year-olds, so I thought maybe I could bring in another perspective, kind of personal, in terms of why I think I probably was kind of custom made for this type of role. My dad's an electrical engineer and my mom was a social worker. And when I think about kind of the work that I do, it really does kind of blend that kind of analytical, data-driven way that I was raised by my dad, but also the people-centered and kind of making something a meaningful difference in my work that my mom raised me to be. So it all makes sense a little bit. I studied operations research and financial engineering for my undergrad at Princeton. So I took one transportation class. A lot of us only get a little bit of transportation in undergrad. Worked for 3 years at Parsons Brinckerhoff, now WSP, in New Jersey, and then moved out to California, I think about 25 years ago, to go to Cal because they had a dual degree in city planning and civil engineering transportation, so that I could have kind of that dual focus, to have those both that kind of analytical and people-centered perspective in my career. My master's work was around transportation safety. I got to work on crosswalk safety kind of at early age there, and then have really focused on safety my whole career since then. With being a lifelong learner in safety, and I think that's kind of these next slides that I want to focus on, is examples of things that just in kind of the recent past couple of years that I have learned from others, that I think has both really helped me unlock and understand safety better, and has really shaped the day-to-day safety work that I do and that we do at Fear and Peers. So next slide, please. We are trending in the wrong direction in a lot of ways for safety in the US, especially as relates to our peer countries around the world that have much better per capita records and safety outcomes. And this has particularly been true in recent years for people outside of the cars. If we've figured out how to protect people inside of the cars, we are not protecting people outside of the cars in that same way. So pedestrians and bicyclists and other vulnerable road users are really kind of feeling the brunt of our disconnect between what kind of other countries and other safety leaders have been able to achieve versus some of the things that we really need to be learning from and understanding better for our kind of practice here in the US. So I've been really interested, next slide please, to try to understand more specifically about kind of what differently and better we can be doing to address that, because our kind of toolbox we've been using isn't working as well as it needs to. So one of the ways that I've been understanding that is kind of thinking about the traditional ease of safety, right? For a very long time, this is how we did safety. We kind of broke it up into the different silos, did some engineering, some education, enforcement, emergency services. Those are largely siloed, but also largely reactive, mostly focused on crash data and mostly focused on kind of what happened in that last, a few minutes leading up to the crash, rather than, maybe what happened 5 hours, 5 days, 5 years, maybe even 5 decades before that crash that had a much more root cause of what led to that crash. We have made really good progress in shifting to the international best practice around safe system in the US by committing to it. But I have seen in a lot of cases, it really still is the ease, right? So it's still kind of a check the box of let's do one of these things in the different silos, but now we just kind of have recycled them into the slices of the wheel. And it's still pretty siloed and pretty reactive. That's not true for everybody. And I think for the people who are learning and understanding more holistically the safe system approach, it's not just the slices of this wheel, but really those statements around the perimeter that make the most impact and are really the biggest shift. That lead us to some of the statements that you've heard from others on this panel, understanding that as humans we're vulnerable, that we are vulnerable, and also that we make mistakes, and that we need to be proactive in designing a system that allows those mistakes to happen without having severe and fatal consequences to them. And so how do we do things proactively, redundantly, and with shared responsibility to be able to address that kind of sense of being human, and our need and everybody's right to be able to get to their destination in whatever mode and by whatever means they're traveling. Next slide, please. So it's been really helpful in kind of thinking about the statements around the perimeter of the wheel to understand what is it that makes us so vulnerable, what is it that causes an injury, and then how can we kind of think about that in a more proactive way. And I've just been doing a lot of listening and learning to the people who are experts in injury prevention, right? So the epidemiologists, to be able to realize what we're facing in the transportation sector is really no different than in any other injury situation. And therefore we can learn a lot from people who've done maybe a lot better at the prevention side of it than we have. So understanding that there's a pathogen, meaning that's what causes an injury, and that pathogen in transportation safety is kinetic energy, right? We learned about that in high school physics. It's exponentially because of speed that the injury transfers to our bodies in a crash, and because we're vulnerable, that can lead to a severe and fatal outcome depending on how much energy happens in that crash. So understanding that, and you can kind of see this exponential relationship for pedestrians here, and why speed matters so much for that outcome. We can ask the question of, well, what makes up kinetic energy risk in the system? And this is a really inherently proactive way to think about injury prevention, because if we can understand that the risk enters through exposure, that basically is vehicle miles traveled, the number of trips and how long those trips are, because this is the presence of vehicles in the system that is creating that opportunity for the energy transfer. So exposure, severity is how fast and how heavy, how much mass is in that can occur that transfers, that leads to that energy transfer. And then likelihood is how likely are we to be coming into conflict within the system such that a crash could occur, such that that energy could transfer. So it's kind of pretty basic. It's obviously very, very data driven, and it's inherently proactive, because if we can understand those three different components, now we can look out at our system and see maybe where one, two, or all three of those is entering the system and where we can be proactively addressing it. Next slide. Something else that I learned from the public health experts and epidemiologists is that it's really much more impactful in injury prevention to be focusing at the system level and the population scale, rather than to be focusing on trying to get one person to individually change their behavior. And if you think about a lot of the things we've been doing for safety for many, many years, it has been much more focused on trying to convince somebody through education or through enforcement, or maybe through warning signs, and to change their behavior, rather than having it be the easy and obvious kind of self-enforcing choice on kind of how behavior happens within the system because of how we've designed it and kind of baked it in. And so that's really what this pyramid is showing, is that if we're able to think about both from the land use and the transportation perspective, kind of why trips happen and how they happen and what options are available to them, and then what risk factors happen along the way as we're making those trips, the more we can go upstream and think about making those trips be able to happen by other modes, making them be able to be shorter trips, and then when they are occurring, having the built environment be such that the speeds are at a survivable level and that the conflict points are lessened. Now we're kind of baking safety into the system rather than being reactive and kind of hoping to change at the individual level how people react, especially if it's a counterintuitive reaction and behavior that we're asking them to take because the system doesn't really set it up as being self-enforcing. So that was also a huge aha moment for me in terms of ways to think about this from a hierarchy, but also tools, right? So this means that affordable housing, mixed land use, transit, road pricing, all the things that shift and shorten trips, put them in different and safer modes, are some of the most impactful things we can be doing for transportation safety. Once we've done that, then we do speed management next. So we kind of really have to be thinking about proactive, especially for arterials, getting speed down to a target kind of survivable speed. And then we do the conflict management, that separation of users in space and time, and using all those wonderful proven safety countermeasures that we know of. But that kind of comes along for the ride after we've done the upstream things and after we've been much more collaborative and holistic and system thinking. This is very different than how I was trained to think about safety originally, and I think how most people think about safety. But it is how our peer countries that have better safety records are thinking about safety and how kind of their systems are designed. Next slide, please. This is just kind of an image that evokes, I think, a lot of that, right, in terms of where those risk factors are going to be present, right? So we have a lot of exposure present in this image because we have an auto-oriented kind of single land use type of environment. We've probably done a lot of cul-de-sac developments that all load onto these arterials. We've made it difficult for people to be able to take modes other than driving to get to their destinations, and we've had level of service, peak hour level of service dictate to us how many number of lanes and things for maybe 30 years in the future type of forecast. So we've created a system where there's a lot of exposure because there's a lot of vehicles, long trips, and high number of car trips just present. Then we've created a severity situation where we have designed this road as if it was a freeway. But it's in a place that we have a lot of pedestrians and bicyclists. So the operating speed is very disconnected from what the target survivability speed should be here. And that delta, that gap, creates a lot of severity concerns. And then, of course, we have the likelihood or the conflicts because there's very limited number of places. A bicyclist traveling here has no separation in space and time. A pedestrian has very limited crossing opportunities, and even somebody trying to get in and out of the side streets in a vehicle is going to have a lot of conflict points. So this, we call it a STROAD, right? The typical kind of suburban arterial that we have all over this country that is trying to be everything to everybody, trying to be both a street and a road at the same time, and is basically being nothing to no one successfully, typically. Anyway, so it's a good opportunity to both see all the risk factors at play proactively, but also to be able to see how we might then be able to address those risk factors. We probably have some crash history here. We may not have some crash history. Regardless, we could go ahead and be treating it. Next slide. This was some research I actually did with Rachel and with Julia Griswold and Akshita Banerjee at UC Berkeley SafeTrek, where I did my research as an undergrad or as a grad student. So kind of fun to continue to do that work. But we just basically took those different risk factors and then the tools to address those risk factors and put it into a hierarchy based on the public health best practice. So starting with demand management, how can you remove trips or shift those to different modes, shorten them? Then speed management, how do you proactively get speed to the survivable target speed? Then that conflict management to separate users in space and time, and layer on some redundancy. Lots of, sometimes that crash will still occur, sometimes that injury will still occur, but how can we make sure we have the post-crash care to be able to not have that be as severe? Next slide. So I kind of wanted to walk all through that, I think, for two reasons. One is to talk about being a lifelong learner and always be open to trying to say this isn't working as well as it could and should, why, and how can we do better. But then also to be able to make a point from the public sector or from the private sector side that I'm representing, why I think it's very helpful for me, at least, to sit in a multidisciplinary team, right? So I have people in my office and in my region that are working at the exposure, likelihood, and severity risk factors, and with tools that can influence demand, speed, and conflict management. And that's really, really important, right? So not doing safety in a silo, but doing safety in a multidisciplinary way. It also means that, sometimes I might be saying and doing something in one direction, and then I find out that another colleague is doing something that's internally inconsistent with that. And those are really healthy and important questions. When we do the safe system paradigm shift, there's a lot of things we need to start doing. There's also a lot of things that we have to stop and change. And if we don't have simultaneous conversations in both of those, we're only going to make incremental and short progress, because some of the bigger things that we're going to have to shift, especially around speed, are going to be the most impactful. And those are often happening, and not by the safety leaders and the safety divisions, but maybe in the operations or the forecasting or the land use side of the house. So really important. And then just from a consulting perspective, again, being a learner and trying to kind of be at the edge of best practice and bring in new technologies and new opportunities, getting to work with a lot of different jurisdictions, with a lot of different teaming partners, and a lot of different geographic and place types and constraints and opportunities, just means that we're able to take a best practice that we try out and learn here, and it works really well, and share that in others in a way that's a little bit more in line with being able to set and be transformative with best practice. So hopefully that was helpful on some perspectives, both on some capacity building and maybe some new approaches that you haven't heard about, and why I've personally found that being in the private sector is a really fulfilling way to do this. It's also a reason to get involved in ITE, because in the same way that I could choose to kind of be in a APBP space or kind of another place where I'm doing complete streets and pedestrian and bicycle safety with a lot of other people who do that and kind of all speak the same language, I've found it to be a lot more impactful and challenging, but also with bigger, more meaning to be involved in ITE, where we do have all the other safety, all the other councils, not just safety and complete streets, so we can start things, but also so we can have conversations about things that might need to stop or shift. That's all I got. Here's me if you want to connect. We are hiring and would love to hear from you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Megan. And I love that you're hiring. That's great. We have a good group here, so that's good news. That's probably the best news they've heard all day. We were going to pause here and do some questions So please, everybody is welcome to um, simply speak up. You're also welcome to raise your hand or just put it in the chat. Lindsay was going to kind of lead us through those questions and answers. But please take a moment to ask the panel anything you'd like.
Wonderful. We got our first question in the chat. What guidance would you offer early rural planners or safety advocates on how to talk about the safety in ways that resonate with rural stakeholders? John, I'm going to start it off with John Davis. I'm going to start it off with you. And then anyone else, if you want to jump in, please feel free from the panel.
I would suggest that you need to understand excuse me, what the issues are and develop a relationship with those stakeholders so that you can again explain the reason why or hear what they're saying and be able to translate that into uh, potential countermeasures or solutions.
So any of our other panel members want to add to that? I can add as well.
Colleen, I'll just jump in and note that you've heard safety is integrated with so many other decisions that I think to build those partnerships and relationships in order to be successful, you can talk not only about the injuries or fatalities that are associated with crashes, particularly in rural areas, but talk about that you're blocking traffic, that freight won't move through the community, that you're rerouting traffic around a crash can add an hour's travel in a rural community. So preventing those crashes that lead to injury and fatalities will also keep the economy moving. It'll keep people moving. It'll get folks to school on time, to work on time. So there's a number of benefits of reducing crashes that aren't just safety and saving lives that we've talked about. And I think you can use a lot of those reasons to bring the right people to the table to get the outcome that you're looking for and improve the safety outcome, but you're also improving outcomes from a lot of different perspectives. So it's just another way to build the partnerships and relationships that you need in order to get the project completed that you want to get completed.
I found it helpful, and I agree with what Rob is saying. Absolutely. I think, when I think about a rural environment, I think it's arguably a more important area to operate in than in an urban space. And that's because typically in urban environments, speeds are higher. That means that your risk of fatal or serious injury is higher. That roads are less forgiving. Sometimes you have trees and ditches and sometimes narrow shoulders, and emergency response times can be a lot longer in rural areas. Now, you don't have pedestrians and bikes that create a lot of conflicts, so there's definitely lots of safety challenges in urban areas. But I think it's when I'm speaking to rural groups, it's important to sort of like reinforce the heightened safety challenge that exists in rural areas.
Yeah, Rachel, that's a great point. And in in my experience, it really takes understanding the community. So are they heavy agriculture? If they are, is that cut to cool time frame is very critical to the farm operations. And so expressing the safety, kind of what Rob was saying, that there's a collision on this rural highway, it's going to impact your ability to get your produce to where you need to in the time you need to. And so safety is important there. It's also understanding what maybe some of the barriers are, what some of the challenges are, looking at, the types of collisions that are predominantly within that community. Is it rear end or run off the road? Nighttime, because a lot of those rural communities don't have a lot of lighting and safety lighting, and really just looking at what are their drivers, what are their needs, and then tailoring the conversation to them. I think that's a really great way to approach that guidance.
And Lindsay, if I can just throw one other quick idea, there are a lot of low-cost safety improvements. A lot of people, when they're thinking about a safety problem and approaching a safety problem, they're thinking it's a major project, and we just can't get the resources to do that. And there are lower cost improvements that can make a big difference. So you'll want to try to bring those to the conversation as well.
And I'd just like to add that the demand, speed, and conflict management principles apply. And we did a rural highway safety plan for Santa Cruz County recently, and there was a parking location next to a beach right on a rural corridor that all of a sudden you kind of pop up and it's like a surf community, right? So we did a demand management by thinking about, could you have parking reservations at that? So you would know if you got there, oh, I'm going to have a space, because otherwise people were parking all along the road and there was a lot of crashes because they were in unexpected places. We did severity by doing some significant like gateway treatments on either side of this area so that you'd really slow down and be at the target speed for the increased presence of bikes. And then likelihood conflict management by thinking about, organizing the driveways better, or thinking about having sidewalks so you'd be separating in space. So some of those same principles is the toolkit is different if you're in different contexts, but the kind of the science of it isn't in terms of what causes an injury and what the risk factors are and how you need to be proactive about them.
Awesome. We have 2 more questions in there. Sorry, John, did I cut you off, Milton?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I'll answer any of these.
Okay. So for a trail crossing, would you rather narrow the road crossing and shift traffic, or provide a pedestrian refuge island? Could you do both? That's what I'd recommend. But yeah, panel, love
My
your take
answer
on
is
that.
yes, both. I mean, it goes down to what you're trying to achieve. So if you're narrowing, you're reducing exposure, the time that people are going to be out there. And if you are putting a median in there, you are reducing, or you're providing them an option to hold off in multi-lane crossing. So I don't know the condition that's faced. Ultimately, the less time they're exposed to higher speed traffic, the more that they are benefited by the solution.
Yeah.
If you have sufficient width.
Yeah, and I also think one of the things when we talk about safety, it's risk and exposure, but we also want to take into account the bicyclists and pedestrians' feeling of safety. So one of the greatest things I've learned is that people's perceptions are their reality, and sometimes the collision numbers don't match what the community's feeling about a certain area or a certain location. And so it's really understanding like the levels of traffic stress that are placed upon the road users and minimizing that as well, so they feel safer and they are safer. We're getting more questions popping up, and we only have 10 minutes left, and I've got some other things to go to. So if we could, I'll go through those questions. But I would ask the panel, let's have one person respond, and then others, please add in more advice. This next question is awesome, and I would love to see each one of our panel members to put in their piece of advice into the chat. But Ron, I'm going to pick on you because you haven't answered yet, but what is the best advice you can give for future transportation engineers who really want to make a difference and want to emphasize safe systems approach and Vision Zero in their own work? Any of our panel members? Ron, do you want to give it a shot, or John, since you're off mute?
So, yes, believe that you can make a difference. Key. Be willing to talk to those who can offer you advice how to hone that, and have them participate with you in that discussion. Safe systems, a prime example. Safer land use. It can go on into different areas, but if you believe in it, you'll get the presentation right that helps explain it to people. And when you partner with others, they can help you refine and make that a better discussion for everybody. But the people who make the biggest difference are the ones who are willing to get slapped down a lot too.
Yep.
I was gonna talk about the getting slapped down a lot as well. I think it happens with a lot of safety professionals. I think also tying back to the rural stakeholders, there may be two rural towns in Georgia I'm not welcome in anymore, but yeah, the best you can do is try to implement safety countermeasures, and try to work with those local governments as much as you can to get things across the finish line.
What approaches do you recommend for transportation safety advocates who are trying to make the case for safety improvements in rural areas with limited data?
My recommendation is to get creative with the data you can use. There's a ton of data out there. If you talk to the locals there, you can figure out the right times of year to go. We were once talking to law enforcement who told us watermelon season was the time where local governments, where there's more people crossing the road, and that was the optimal time to get counts. I would say video analytics is a great tool. There's a ton of telematic data available too.
Exponentially, the most important data is going to be speed, right? Because that's what leads to injury. And so if you could, like from a proactive data set, if you could understand what the target survivability speed is, and that'll change based on the context, and compare that to operating speed, which we can harvest now from so many of these data sources, you can proactively monitor kind of one of the most important reasons that an injury would be happening, whether or not you have any crash data.
We've also made wide use of bringing in smart people, and by that, people who've applied technology, who've applied a proven countermeasure, and have them explain it and what they saw in their areas. Sometimes that's much more helpful than you as the advocate for, well, at least me in Washington, bringing somebody from California, wherever it might be, does a lot of benefit to our discussion.
Yep. I was going to give a plug for the e-community. If there's limited data within your area, I'm sure there's very similar situations in other areas that does have the data. And the e-community is a great place to go out and ask for that. So if you're not familiar with the e-community, you can join communities of practice, you can join councils and committees, and then crowdsource more information and more data. Okay, there's one last question. Megan, there was a question asked about number of lanes in ped bike risks. Would you mind answering that in the chat? But then, so here's the last question, and then we'll move on to the closing. What can you tell a graduate student with a strong passion for transportation engineering? What can he or she do more at this level to be more competent in this field? Join an ITE technical council. But panel, I would love to hear from you.
Well, I think one of the most important things that I've learned is this idea that when you're trying to improve safety, there's often trade-offs that you have to make. And I did my master's coursework and mostly focused on traffic modeling. And if you have the ability to focus not on safety, but can help us balance those trade-offs, like between operations, capacity, and safety, that can be really helpful. So I think I'm learning the power of partnering with others outside of safety, actually, in order to improve safety. So that might be my piece of advice.
That's awesome. Yeah, and just always learn, always ask questions. I love Megan's in the in the chat. Always ask, but why? The more you understand the reasoning behind it, the more you'll learn and be able to make those decisions in the future. So always ask questions.
Lindsay, point is peers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, a lot of people have been through things that you haven't, and talking to them about what they experience and how they experience goes a long way. And the other thing is politics plays a lot in the decisions that you're going to have to make. And sometimes the right thing is not necessarily what is done. And you just, that's not you. You just have to move on from it and work on it from there. Don't get frustrated.
Yeah. All right, Colleen, in our last 5 minutes, do you want, yeah, thank you. All right, getting involved with ITE or safety at ITE. So this is something that I am very passionate about. Megan talked to you a little bit about epidemiology, and fun fact about me is that I actually studied health science with a focus in epidemiology. Then I went into traffic collision investigation, and I did that for a number of years. And I was so tired of seeing the number of people injured and killed on our roads that I told my father I no longer wanted to take over the company that he had started, and that I wanted to put him out of a job and create safe roadway environments. So I went back to school and have dedicated my career to doing just that, to creating safe infrastructure. So safety is the heart of and the reason why I got into transportation, and how I found my way here to ITE. And Colleen, I am not seeing the ability to switch slides, so if you can go to the next one. Thank you. So how you can get involved in safety. What I'm here to talk to you about is the technical councils. So they are topic-based groups driving advancement in core areas of transportation practice. We've got councils, committees, and great idea groups. No matter where your interest lies, I bet we have a place for you. Through our road safety and action plan, each one of our councils and committees have a key role in making that roadmap come to life, and with a focus on safety. And so there's a place literally in any area that fascinates you that you can get involved. You can go to the website here that you see below. On the next slide, we've got a list of our councils. So we have the various councils that you see on the screen. Underneath them is the committees that sit underneath that council. And then we have a couple cross-cutting committees and great idea groups. And what the great idea groups are they're topics that our members have brought up and have shown a continued interest in. And so we form these great idea groups, and eventually they either may become a council, a committee, a cross-cutting committee, or the work may sunset, and then we go on to the next great idea. And with that, we have our Safety Council. Since this is all about safety, I did want to highlight the Safety Council. Megan was former chair of the Safety Council, and the current chairs and vice chairs are great. They've got a lot on their plate with the safety roadmap, but there's a lot of things that they cover. We've got upcoming events that we're really excited about, a lot happening in May, June, and then in July at the annual meeting in Detroit. On the next slide. So there's different types of ways you can get involved. These are listed from the more involved and higher effort to less quantity. So we've got conferences, a journal article, quick bites, web resources, technical briefings, informational reports, recommended practices, and ITE publications. There's also monthly meetings that our councils and committees hold that you can get involved in and just learn from. So no matter your level of expertise or your level of understanding, we need volunteers, and there's a way that you can jump in and help and learn as well. Next slide. So these are a few of the things that we are working on right now from the safety roadmap. We've got a kinetic energy measurement technical brief, Safety 4.0 applied safety data applications for the ITE journal, and we have a recommended practice for implementing safe system approach for public agencies that we are getting ready to kick off. So those are all areas that you can get involved in. Next slide. And again, we've got a ton of things coming out. So the things that you see ready for ITE review, those are done and are just in the final draft version, and will become available for for publication and for your review. And the other ones that are in progress, if you see anything on this list that sparks your interest, you can reach out to myself, Colleen, Matt, any of the ITE staff, reach out to the council and committee through their websites and get involved. Next slide. I know we are 1 minute over. So these are developing trends this year. They're getting started. We're doing a lot of work on them. So if you have a passion for any of these, we're also looking for more volunteers to help as we go through these 2026 developing trends. And Megan Mittman on the call here is one of our champions. So thank you, Megan. On this last slide, these are some ways that we are going to deliver and work on the developing trends. So we've got journal articles, implementation recommendations, and the developing trend report. So there's a lot of opportunity for involvement, discussion, and learning. Next. This is our safety roadmap and action plan. It goes through every level from student engagement to partnerships. So a lot of fun things here. We encourage you to review the road safety map and action plan if you get a chance. There's a lot of great information in there. Next slide. So now I ask you, if you have not already, to become an ITE safety partner. I've done it personally myself, and every decision we make as transportation professionals has the potential to save lives. And that's why I support the Safety Pledge, which is really a shared commitment to putting safety first and taking tangible actions that reduce serious injuries and fatalities on our transportation network. So it reinforces a simple truth that safety must be a core value and not an afterthought. So if you haven't, I encourage you to go up, sign up for the Safety Pledge. There's on here some recommended pledges to take, or you can take your own. It really is your own journey, but we want this to be more than just a pledge you take, but an action that you take, and something that you look at routinely and make sure that you're doing it every day and in every decision you make in your career. And with that, I will say thank you for bearing with us for 3 additional minutes. Thank you for all of the questions in the chat, and thank you panel members for replying to those as I've been talking. So thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you all.